I never believed the stories about this place. I'd heard the whispers from the other employees don't look at the man who stands near the gas pumps at night, but no one ever told me why. I thought it was just a joke until the night I looked it. It was 3:12 a.m., and I was alone in the store, staring at the flickering security monitors. Business had been dead all night. The wind howled outside, making the old metal sign above the entrance rattle. I was about to grab another energy drink when I noticed something strange on the cameras. A man standing by pump #4. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring directly at the store. I leaned closer. Something was wrong. His face looked blurred, like a bad photograph. His clothes were soaked, hanging off his body like he had just climbed out of a lake. My stomach twisted. No cars had pulled up in hours. I would have heard if someone had walked across the lot. I checked the live feed again. He was closer now, standing just outside the glass doors, but I hadn't seen him move. I swallowed hard. The automatic doors hadn't opened. The motion sensors hadn't beeped. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, the lights flickered. When they came back on, the man was inside the store, standing at the end of aisle 2. My body refused to move. I reached for the emergency phone, but before I could dial, the register screen glitched, and words began typing across the screen. "Do you see me now?" The lights flickered again. He was right in front of the counter. The air turned ice cold. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. He leaned forward, his blurry face distorting further, his lips stretching into something not human. And then, he whispered, "Now, you're mine." Everything went black. When I woke up, the store was empty. The clock read 3:13 a.m. I checked the security footage. It showed me at the counter, frozen in place, the lights flickering, and then nothing. The man had never appeared on the cameras, but when I turned off the monitors, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the dark screen, and standing right behind me was him. I had only been working the night shift at the Roadside market for 2 weeks when I found out why the last guy quit. Or at least, that's what I thought it was. Around 1:45 a.m., when I first noticed something strange. I was at the register when I heard a soft shuffling sound coming from the stockroom. That was weird, no one else was here. I glanced at the security cameras. Nothing, just empty aisles. I sighed, grabbed my flashlight, and headed toward the back. The stockroom door was slightly open, the flickering fluorescent light casting weird shadows inside. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. I stepped inside. Everything seemed normal. Boxes of chips, soda crates, cleaning supplies. I was about to leave when I noticed something. One of the locker doors was open. We only had one employee locker, and it hadn't been used since I started working here. The last guy, Dan, had quit suddenly. No one told me why. I stepped closer. Inside the locker, I saw a name tag, Dan, and beneath it, a note, crumpled and YELLOWED. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It was written frantically, as if someone had scribbled it in a hurry. "If you're reading this, it's already watching you." My stomach dropped. I turned instinctively toward the stockroom door and froze. There was a face peeking through the gap, but it wasn't a person. The head was too thin, the eyes too black, the mouth stretched too wide, revealing rows of uneven, jagged teeth. I stumbled back, knocking over a shelf of cleaning supplies. The bottles crashed onto the floor as I scrambled out of the stockroom. The second I reached the register, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My breath came in short gasps. My hands were shaking as I checked the cameras. Nothing. I rewound the footage. At exactly 1:45 a.m., the stockroom door had creaked open on its own. At 1:46 a.m., something had crawled out. Long limbs, pale skin, a grin too wide for a human face. At 1:47 a.m., it disappeared, not into the aisles, not through the doors, Just gone. I quit the next day, but before I left, I checked Dan's employee file. He had never officially quit, just disappeared. The manager never filed a missing persons report. I guess now I know why. Night shifts at the roadside market were usually dull. A few truckers stopping by, some insomniacs buying cigarettes, and the occasional drunk looking for snacks. I had worked there for 3 months, and nothing truly strange had ever happened. Until that night. It was 2:37 a.m. The only sound in the store was the hum of the refrigerators and the occasional rustle of the wind outside. The road was completely empty, no headlights, no signs of life. Just me, a dimly lit parking lot, and endless darkness stretching in both directions. I was behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, when the automatic door slid open with a chime. I looked up. A man had entered at first. He seemed ordinary tall, wearing a long dark trench coat with the hood pulled over his face. But something about him immediately made my stomach tighten. He moved ... strangely. His steps were slow and deliberate, almost as if he was measuring each one. His breathing was deep and controlled, like someone trying to suppress something. "Good evening," I said, forcing a smile. He didn't respond. Didn't even look at me. Instead, he walked toward the refrigerators in the back, where the energy drinks were. He stood there for too long, not opening the door, not reaching for anything, just standing there, his head tilted slightly, as if he were listening to something I couldn't hear. I shifted uneasily behind the counter and glanced at the security monitors. That's when my stomach dropped. On the screen, I could see the back of the store, the man standing by the refrigerators. But something was wrong. His reflection was missing. The refrigerators had glass doors, and everyone's reflection showed up when they stood in front of them. But his, nothing. I felt a cold sweat forming on my back. My fingers hovered over the emergency button beneath the counter, but I hesitated. What would I even say? That a guy's reflection wasn't showing. The cops would laugh me off the phone. Then, he moved. Slowly, he turned and walked toward the counter. His footsteps were completely silent, despite the old tiles always creaking underfoot. He placed a single item on the counter, an energy drink. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a $5 bill. It was old, wrinkled, and wet. I reached out to take it, but as soon as my fingers touched the surface, I recoiled. It felt wrong, too soft, like flesh, and then I saw it. The bill wasn't normal. It had no face, no president's portrait, no text, just blank, empty paper. My throat went dry. Sir, this isn't real money." My voice barely came out. The man finally moved his head, looking straight at me for the first time, and my entire body froze. He had no eyes, no mouth, no features, just a smooth, blank expanse of skin where a face should have been. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in panicked gasps. My legs refused to move. The man's head tilted slightly, as if he were studying me. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and pointed toward the security cameras behind me. I didn't want to turn, but I did, and what I saw on the screen made me scream. The camera feed showed the store, showed me behind the counter, showed the shelves, the refrigerators, everything. But the man, he wasn't there. I spun back around. He was gone. The door had never opened. There was no sign of him anywhere. The energy drink was still on the counter, untouched. My heart pounded as I turned back to the security screen. I rewound the footage, played it back. The store door had opened by itself. No one had entered, but when I looked down at the counter, the $5 bill was still there. But now, words had appeared on it, scrawled in deep black ink. "You're next." I quit my job the next morning. Working the night shift at a roadside market wasn't exactly thrilling, but I preferred the quiet. Fewer customers meant fewer problems. that was, until the freezer door started opening by itself. At first I thought it was just a faulty latch. It was an old store, and the freezers were ancient. Maybe the cold air was causing pressure shifts. But after the 5th time I had to close it in one night, I started getting uneasy. It was always the same freezer, the one at the very back, the one we hardly used. One night, around 3 a.m., I was restocking snacks when I heard it again. Creeeaak. The unmistakable sound of the heavy freezer door swinging open. I sighed, grabbing a mop to brace it shut properly this time. But when I turned the corner, there were footprints leading away from the freezer. Wet, bare, human footprints. A chill ran down my spine. The floors had been dry all night. I swallowed hard and stepped forward, gripping the mop tighter. The freezer door stood wide open. Inside, thick frost covered the walls. The air was so cold it hurt my skin. And then I saw it, a handprint, pressed against the frost-covered glass on the inside of the freezer. It was fresh. I slammed the door shut and locked it. My heart pounded as I staggered back, trying to rationalize what I just saw. There was no way someone had been inside, right? I checked the security cameras. The footage showed me walking toward the freezer. The door was already wide open when I arrived, but there was something else. At exactly 2:59 a.m., the door had swung open by itself, and for exactly 1 second, something stepped out. Something tall, something with no face, and then it just vanished. I didn't wait to see if it would come back. I ran. The next day, my manager asked why I left early. I told him. He just stared at me for a long moment before sighing. "You're not the first to see it," he muttered. He handed me my last paycheck, then added, "But you're lucky. The last guy never made it out." I never asked what happened to him, and I never went back. The roadside market I worked at was small, old, and always had a strange, lingering smell of damp cardboard and something metallic. The night shifts were boring, but easy money at least. That's what I told myself, until I noticed aisle 6. It started about 2 weeks into my job. Every night, at exactly 2:42 a.m., I would hear it. A faint whispering sound, barely audible, over the hum of the coolers. It was coming from the canned goods aisle. At first, I thought it was the old AC vents, but then I realized the whispers were saying my name. "Ethan." I snapped my head toward aisle 6, my heart pounding. The aisle was empty, but the whispering continued. I laughed nervously, shaking my head. Sleep deprivation, that's all. But then, something moved. A can. One of the soup cans rolled off the shelf and hit the floor with a loud clatter. I stood frozen. There was no one there. I walked over, picking up the can. My fingers trembled slightly, and then I saw it. A face pressed against the glass of the freezer behind me. Pale, hollow-eyed lips, moving soundlessly. I turned so fast that I nearly fell backward. But when I looked at the freezer's reflection, there was nothing there. My skin prickled as I backed away. I decided to check the security cameras. The footage showed me standing in the aisle, picking up the can. But the reflection in the freezer glass was still there. It was watching me, and then it turned its head to stare directly into the camera. I didn't sleep that morning. The next night, I kept my back away from the freezers. The whispering started again at 2:42 a.m. on the dot. This time, I didn't check. I didn't look. I didn't turn around. And when I quit the following week, I never went back. But I still dream about aisle 6, and sometimes, in the silence of my apartment, I still hear it, Ethan.